Welcome to the Rime Buddhist Center's Dharma Talk podcast, Achieving Peace Through Compassion. This podcast is a recording of the Dharma Talks given during our Sunday service.
Good. It's going to be sad. We're good. Can everybody hear me? All right. Glad you're all here. I'm going to talk about Buddha's life story today. I'm going to hit some of the highlights that I think are interesting. And that's what we're going to do today. So, the Buddha, the figure we call the Buddha, his name was Siddhartha. It's Father's Day. I'm going to talk about his father today. His father was Suddhodana, that was his name. And the story gets told, we're told he was a king and that they lived in a palace. And maybe it's myth-making, maybe that's accurate, maybe it's not. I imagine like a Disney cartoon, and it certainly wasn't that, but that was the kind of life that Siddhartha was living. And people forget to talk about his mother sometimes. His mother was named Mahamaya. Okay? So Mahamaya gets pregnant, and the king, Suddhodana, he goes to a fortune teller. He says, what's going to happen to my son? And in those days, it was common for people to go to fortune tellers, especially people of means like Suddhodana. So he goes to this fortune teller and he says, what's going to become of my son? The fortune teller says, he's either going to be a great and powerful king, a world ruler, or he's going to be a spiritual teacher who will touch many lives. So that's what the Suddhodana hears about his son. And so he thinks what thousands of people think when their kid says, I'm going to art school. Do you know what that is? I don't want my kid to be poor, right? So when he hears about his kid being a spiritual teacher, he does not want that for him. He wants him to be a great king, to be like, sometimes we want our kids to be like us, but better, right? That's what he wanted for his son. So he was a king, so he wanted his son to be a better king, not a spiritual teacher. So he came up with this plan. He was going to design this life for his son that was perfect, where he would have everything he could possibly want. So he'd be so busy being happy that he wouldn't think about spiritual things at all. That was the dad's plan. So he didn't think about like what we think about now, like don't spoil your kid, right? Don't give your kid too many things; they'll be spoiled. I always thought that was kind of weird. Life's hard enough to spoil our kids, but he didn't think that way. He thought, oh, I give my kid everything, right? So I think of that Gen Z song, "Young Forever." You all know it, right? We all know it. Living life like a video where the sun is always out, you never get old, the champagne's always cold, the music's always good. Pretty girls just happen to stop by and look, right? You all know that, right? So that's the kind of life. So he's created this perfect life. So Siddhartha is growing up, and he's got all the food he wants all the time. He's got all the best toys. I don't know what toys were back then. He didn't have an Xbox and an iPhone. But he's got all the best toys of the time. And the servants are also nice to him. And as he, in fact, approaches adulthood, he's got the women paying attention to him too, right? He's got just anything you could want. And eventually he has an arranged marriage, gets a wife, and he has a son. And he realizes, though, he starts to feel like, I'm missing something from life. Something's not right. So even though he has more than we could imagine, maybe he has just everything he could want, still not happy. So he realizes that and thinks, there's got to be more to life than this. So he's interested in seeing what the real world is like. So he gets this servant, this chariot driver, to take him out of the palace, which he's never left, or he's never really seen like what people live like, because when he has left the palace, like he's been heavily escorted, so couldn't see him. So he sneaks out with this chariot driver to go see a village to see people. And so the story we're told is that he saw what we call the four sights. And I have something to say about those, but I'm going to talk about what those are. We're told four things that Siddhartha never saw in the palace. And when he went to the village, he saw these four things. It changed everything. So, go through what the four sights are. So, he's going through this village, and he sees a sick person. He sees a sick person. And I imagine it being like not somebody sneezing, having a cold, but like somebody with something like leprosy or something where you look at someone and you're like, oh, that's unwell. So he says to his friend, he says, what am I looking at? And his friend says, oh, that's a sick person. Everyone gets sick. So that's really everyone? And so he's surprised by this. So they go a little longer through the village, and they see a very old person. So I imagine somebody with gray hair and a cane or something, but they see a very old person. And again, Siddhartha asks his friend, he says, what's going on here? And his friend says, everyone gets older. We all get old. That happens to everyone. And again, Siddhartha's really, really shaken, really surprised. They keep going, and then they see a dead body. And again, Siddhartha is like, what is that? It's clearly not a sleeping person. And again, his friend says, we all die. And then just imagine you've never been told about death, and then you suddenly see a dead person, right? Can't imagine. And then they see a group of, we're going to call them yogis, spiritual men. They see this group of guys who appear to have nothing, but they appear to have some joy. And they're doing spiritual practices, but not like they're bored. They're doing spiritual practices like they want to do. And so, again, Siddhartha asks, what is going on here? What are these? What's happening here? And his friend tells him, these are people looking for spiritual truth. And they have decided that's the focus of their lives. So, from seeing these four things, Siddhartha was deeply inspired. He decides he doesn't want to live in a palace anymore. He wants to go out into the wilderness, be a spiritual person, and try to learn the meaning of life. But I want to share with you what I think about this story. Because when I first read this story, it's something about it didn't sit right. And I'm going to tell you what. So, first he saw a sick person, right? And are we to believe that Siddhartha never got a cold, never faced illness? I don't think so. I think that what he saw was someone without health care. Because I think for at least the first three of these signs, what he really never saw in the palace, what he really was sheltered from, is poor people. Poor people. So he sees a person without medical care, a person that's just sick and suffering without medical care. And then what else did he see? He saw an old person. And I'm sure he knew about aging because he saw it at bare minimum, he saw his father getting hurt, right? And so what he saw out there was people aging without the comforts of living in a palace, aging without someone helping, right? So he saw an old person with nothing, and then saw a dead body. Do we really think he didn't know anything about death? Probably he had some pets that died, but maybe he was told the old story like, oh, your dog went to live on the farm. Right? Maybe. But I saw bugs that were dead at least, right? So he knew something about that. But I tend to think that he had same sanitized presentation that we have. That is, if you've seen a dead person, and you've seen a dead person in a funeral, you know those are not the same, right? So I think what he saw out there was just a dead body in the street. That's really different than the way we're usually exposed to death, right? And also, soon after he was born, his mother had died. Soon after he was born. And I think he knew. I think he carried the loss of his mother around. So even though he had a loving stepmother, I think he carried the loss of his mother around. So I really think with Free Science, what he really saw was that his life in the palace was an illusion. And we can all kind of take something from that because we all have lived in whatever context we're living in. We don't really see how other people, right? I'm incredibly grateful that my father, because he had a good union job, he was able to lift himself up from lower class to middle class, and therefore to lift me up from lower class to middle class. And because I grew up middle class, I don't know how a lot of people live, right? I didn't have the extreme sheltering that Siddhartha did, but I don't know how a lot of people live, not really. And that's something that we can all recognize in our lives. So, where was I? Okay, so he has left the palace and he has gone to live in the wilderness. Okay, and he studies with some various spiritual teachers of the day, and he learns some meditation practices, and he learns some yoga. He learns a lot of things, but he does not find Siddhartha does not find what. Okay, so eventually he gets with these five friends. They're called the five ascetics. And they decide what they're going to try to do to find spiritual awakening is to not eat, right? To not take care of your body so that your mind is all there is, so then you have a spiritual awakening. And that didn't work either. So found that to be one thing as well. It's what happens when you don't eat. Just thinking about them, right? So he decides by himself he's going to go sit under a tree. That's great resolve. And he says, I'm going to sit here until I learn fundamental spiritual truths. I'm just going to sit here. He's decided that truth is within us. That's what he thinks. The truth is within us. I'm going to sit here until I figure it out. And so that's what he does. And he has, at this time, he's been out of the palace for 6 years. And sits under this tree, which we call it the Bodhi tree. Its official name is Ficus religiosa. So he sits under this tree. And part of the story we're told is about this being called Mara. And Mara is like a personification of kind of like a devil figure, a personification of evil. Not really evil, though, that's saying a bit much. But we can take Mara to be a literal being or a projection that Siddhartha's conjuring with his own mind. We can take it either way. So, but I'm going to tell it like Mara's a real being. So Siddhartha's sitting there trying to realize spiritual truth, and Mara appears. And I picture the devil, but that's probably not what we're supposed to picture with Mara, but I picture the devil with the horns in it. But Mara appears, and he conjures monsters. Okay, he conjures monsters to try to scare Siddhartha into getting up and leaving. Yes. So he conjures monsters. I imagine like Dracula and vampires, but probably it wasn't that. But he conjures these monsters, and Siddhartha ignores them. He's unshaken. Okay, so that doesn't work. And then Mara, you're told, conjures beautiful dancing girls to try to distract Siddhartha and get him just to get up on that tree, right? Still, that doesn't. So then Mara just goes up and talks to him and says, who do you think you are? You're just some guy. You're going to realize spiritual truth. You're not going to realize anything. You're just some guy. And so what Siddhartha does is he touches the ground. If you ever see an image of the Buddha where he's touching the ground, that is what that represents. He literally and figuratively grounds himself, face of stress and struggle, literally and figuratively, because he literally touches the ground. He says, "I see you, Mara." And Mara just disappears. And I really like the grounding part that touches the ground. So if you see an image of the Buddha touching the ground, that's why. So this is when Siddhartha becomes the Buddha. He realized fundamental spiritual truths. He realized the Four Noble Truths. There is suffering. The cause of suffering is attachment. There's a way out of suffering. The way is the Buddhist path. And he also realizes what we call the middle way. That is, he tried having everything and consuming everything and it didn't make him happy. And he also tried having nothing, consuming nothing. And it's really believable that didn't make him happy either, right? So he realized that we need something in the middle of giving into all our temptations all the time and giving up everything. Something in the middle of those two is the best way of our lives. And in my own life, I've realized I make the worst decisions when I'm really excited or when I'm really sad. Those are when I make the worst decisions, right? When I'm even-minded, that's when I make the best decisions. I realize that. So I really like the middle way teaching. And so I go real fast on the last part. But he lived to old age. Unlike some other spiritual teachers, he lived into old age. So he lived for decades. And we are told he gave 84,000 teachings. 84,000. And that sounds like an incredible amount. A lot of teachings. The point is, he gave a whole lot of teachings because he was around. His students were blessed I had him around. And the end of his life, we're told he ate some spoiled food. So check your expiration dates on food. And he had a slow, lingering death. He died. And his assistant, Ananda, went to him as he was laying down dying and said, hey, talk about that. But he said, hey, are all the teachings you gave, are they all important? Are all the rules important? And the Buddha, his name's the Buddha now because he had attained point. The Buddha says, well, pay attention to the important rules, but some of the less important ones you can let slide. And then the Buddha died. So his friend, Ananda, is the name of his assistant. Ananda did not ask which teachings were the important ones, but that's okay because I think we can figure it out. There are 84,000 of them, and we're going to try to study them all. So that's it for today. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I love you all. Have a good day.
Thank you for listening to the Rime Buddhist Center's Dharma Talk podcast. Music was provided by Barefoot Bran Music. Please consider supporting the Rime Buddhist Center by making a donation at our website at www.rimecenter.org/donate.